If this is your first time here, my name is Brent. I have been an English teacher in the United States for over 20 years. If this is not your first time here, welcome back. In today's English lesson, we are going to look at a short news clip about France saying, hey, Israel, you might have too many weapons. You might be bombing Gaza too much. And then I will come back and teach English you will need if you are going to take the IELTS or TOEFL exam, or maybe you just want to express yourself a little bit better in your next English conversation. The news is great for improving your English, but they do use some pretty advanced vocabulary. You will also be able to hear some different accents. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, will be using an Israeli accent. The news reporter is British, so she will have a British accent. And we will talk about Emmanuel Macron. He is the president of France. We will talk about his English, even though he doesn't speak any English in this news clip. There is a translator, and that translator, I think, has an Australian accent. Lots of stuff to learn in this English lesson, but let's take a look at that news clip.
Israel continued to launch deadly strikes on Gaza on Sunday, coming just after its prime minister hit out at France's president for saying arms sales to Israel for use in the Strip should be stopped.
Because they are British, they sometimes use slightly different vocabulary than we do. And this first one is an English phrasal verb, hit out. For each of these terms, phrasal verbs, idioms, I will have a picture, I will have the official definition, and I will use that term in a sentence. Hit out means to strongly criticize someone. In other words, you tell somebody they are doing something wrong. That's criticizing them. The prime minister hit out at the French president for saying that arms sales to Israel should stop. If I may ask, could you hit that like button? It just helps other English learners find this English lesson. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss another English lesson. Now, in American English, and I don't share my opinion when I cover these news stories. I don't think that is right. I would rather you express your opinion in the comment section. But I will say this: American English is better than British English. I mean, I have to say that. I'm an American English teacher. So we don't use that English phrasal verb hit out, but we will use lash out in the same exact way to criticize someone. But let's talk about what a lash is first. We have a couple different kinds in English. One, and this is where the phrasal verb comes from, lash. A whip is a long, thin tool used to hit things. Lash out, lash out. Lash can also be used as a verb. If someone gets lashes, that means they are getting whipped. This did not happen in the news report. I just wanted to use lash in a sentence about this news story. Netanyahu compared France's decision to lash Israel with unfair treatment. Do you know that part of the body in English we call an eyelash? The small hairs that grow on the edge of your eyelids. Here is a bonus term. Eyelids are the flaps of skin you close to protect your eyes. The man blinked and his long eyelashes touched his cheek. This part of your face we call your cheek in English. That man must have had some really long lashes.
Israel continued to launch deadly strikes on Gaza on Sunday, coming just after its prime minister hit out at France's president for saying arms sales to Israel for use in the Strip should be stopped.
Shame on them. Is Iran imposing an arms embargo on Hezbollah, on the Houthis, on Hamas, and on its other proxies?
In that clip, you heard Benjamin Netanyahu speak English, and guess what? His English is pretty good. We would say that he has an Israeli accent. His first language is Hebrew, but he was educated in the United States at some of our best universities. Let's read about how Benjamin Netanyahu learned English. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, learned English during his childhood. He spent part of his early life in the United States when his family moved to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is one of our largest cities. I believe it is our 5th largest city, and it is located in the state of Pennsylvania. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We have some really long names for places here in the United States. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Netanyahu attended, I have never heard of this name, so I hope I am pronouncing it correctly, Cheltenham, I guess. Not that important, but I guess he attended Cheltenham High School, where he improved his English through daily use in school and social settings. Yeah, I would hope he had friends at that high school. Hopefully, everyone has friends in high school, and I'm sure they did not speak Hebrew, so he was forced to speak English. His time in the US helped him become fluent, and he later attended college at MIT, further solidifying his English skills. Solidifying. I wanted to talk about that word now because we will talk about it later in this lesson, or at least a word that means almost the same thing. Solidifying is another way to say to make stronger.
Israel continued to launch deadly strikes on Gaza on Sunday, coming just after its prime minister hit out at France's president for saying arms sales to Israel for use in the Strip should be stopped.
Arms. You may know the English word arms. Most of us have 2 of them, but arms is used in a different way here. If you look at the picture, you probably already know. Weapons, especially guns used in war. Macron said that France should stop sending arms to Israel for use in Gaza.
Shame on them.
Benjamin Netanyahu says, shame on them. He is talking about the French government. This is a phrase used to express strong disapproval or disappointment. You don't like what somebody is doing. You don't approve of it. Shame on you for not studying your English every day. If you have made it this far in the video, I'm sure you are a very serious English learner. Netanyahu said shame on them when talking about countries that support an arms embargo on Israel. If you don't know what arms embargo is, don't worry. We will talk about that next.
Shame on them. Is Iran imposing an arms embargo on Hezbollah, on the Houthis, on Hamas, and on its other proxies?
Imposing an arms embargo means creating a rule that stops the selling or giving of weapons to a country. Macron said that maybe there should be an arms embargo on Israel if they are going to use those weapons in Gaza. This story came out about 2 days ago. Yesterday, Israel bombed a school in the Gaza Strip, causing even more deaths. I am currently working on that story. If you would like to see that story, please let me know in the comments and I will do that one next. Macron talked about imposing an arms embargo on Israel to stop weapons from reaching Gaza. I don't think there has been anything official, but news reports are coming out that our president here in the United States, Joe Biden, isn't exactly happy with as much death that is being caused in Gaza right now. So let's look at a sentence below. There are new reports out that say our president, Joe Biden, and Benjamin Netanyahu don't exactly get along. I do think they have a friendship, but right now, I don't think they are seeing eye to eye. If there is an official news story about that situation, I will cover it here on this channel.
Is Iran imposing an arms embargo on Hezbollah, on the Houthis, on Hamas?
The Houthis. On this channel, we have talked about Hamas, we have talked about Hezbollah, but we haven't talked about the Houthis. This is a group involved in fighting in Yemen. And just in case you don't know where Yemen is, It borders Saudi Arabia and Oman. In English, we would say it is on the Arabian Peninsula. Netanyahu asked if countries like France were stopping Iran from sending weapons to the Houthis. Maybe we should talk really briefly about who the Houthis are. Because, like Hamas and Hezbollah, they do receive backing, they do receive money, weapons from the country of Iran. It is a proxy of Iran. We will talk about what a proxy is in a minute. Poor Yemen, they have been through quite a tough time over the past couple decades. But the Houthis are in Yemen now. The Houthis are a group of fighters in Yemen. They are part of a religious group called the Zaydi Shia Muslims. The Houthis started fighting the Yemen government because they wanted more control in their country. They are also fighting against other countries like Saudi Arabia that help the Yemen government. The war in Yemen has caused many problems like hunger and danger for the people. So it can get really confusing when we're talking about religion in this area. It is not the only force that is driving conflict, but it is a major force. If you don't know too much about the religion of Islam, in English we call the religion Islam and the people Muslim. There are Shia Muslims and there are Sunni Muslims. I mean, there's more than that, but those are the two big groups. In Saudi Arabia, they're mostly Sunni Muslims. In Iran, they're mostly Shia. And in Yemen, the Houthis are also Shia Muslims. They're not the exact same type, or we might say sect in English, S-E-C-T. It means a smaller type of a religion from a bigger type. So the Shia Muslims in Iran are called Twelver Shias. And as we read in the paragraph, the Muslims in Yemen are called Zaydi Muslims. Again, not the only driving force or conflict in the Middle East, but it is a big factor. Okay, proxies. I mean, my government, the US government, has used proxies in the past. They're probably still using them, but Iran is known for using proxies. Groups or people that fight or act on behalf of another country. So Iran and Saudi Arabia aren't engaged in a war right now, but they're kind of using other groups to fight their battle, to fight for what they want in a part of the world. Netanyahu said that Iran uses groups like Hamas and Hezbollah as proxies to fight Israel.
Is Iran imposing an arms embargo on Hezbollah, on the Houthis, on Hamas, and on its other proxies? Of course not. The axis of terror stands together. But countries who supposedly oppose this terror axis call for an arms embargo on Israel.
Axis. We have to go a little bit through the history of this term, but when you hear axis and you hear war, think this: a group of countries or organizations working together. Netanyahu called Iran and its allies an axis of terror. And this goes back to World War II. In English, we say the Allies. That's the side the US was on. Allies, friends, those two words mean the same thing. We have the Axis powers. At least that's what we call them in the United States. Who are they? The countries, Germany, Italy, Japan, that fought together in World War II. The Axis powers were enemies of the Allies during World War II.
What a disgrace.
In the video statement released by his office on Saturday, Benjamin Netanyahu also stressed that his country will fight until the battle is won.
I know just a couple lessons ago, I talked about stress and tension as being the same thing. You might have a lot of stress at work, but here we're using stress in a different way. Stressed to say something important. I must stress to you, you need to practice your English every day. Netanyahu stressed that Israel will fight until the battle is won.
In the video statement released by his office on Saturday, Benjamin Netanyahu also stressed that his country will fight until the battle is won. His response came after French President Emmanuel Macron addressed the escalating conflict at a summit of French-speaking nations.
Nous sommes en solidarité avec la sécurité d'Israël.
Macron repeated his country's solidarity with the security of Israel and expressed sympathy for the families of victims and hostages ahead of a year since Hamas's deadly October 7 attacks.
Summit. When I was a kid, the first time I heard of a summit was when those two men got together. The man dressed in black is Ronald Reagan. He was a president of the United States. And in the gray coat, that man is Mikhail Gorbachev. At one time, he was the leader of the Soviet Union. Back in the 1980s, I remember these two men getting together quite often, and every time they did, it was called a summit. A summit is a meeting of important people from different countries. Macron spoke about the conflict during a summit of French-speaking nations. I didn't know this existed, but it doesn't surprise me. The French are usually very proud of their language, and what a great language it is. I don't think there is a summit of English-speaking nations. Is there? I don't know. Maybe there is. But you might also hear summit as in like the top of a mountain. And I think that's where it comes from, like something very important, like the top.
His response came after French President Emmanuel Macron addressed the escalating conflict at a summit of French-speaking nations. Macron repeated his country's solidarity with the security of Israel and expressed sympathy for the families of victims and hostages ahead of a year since Hamas's deadly October 7 attacks.
Solidarity. We mentioned solidify earlier. It's a little different. Remember, solidify to make stronger. Solidarity is support or agreement with someone's situation or feelings. Like you're sticking with them. We might use that English phrasal verb. Macron expressed France's solidarity with the families of victims in Israel. So he was saying like, hey, we're still with you. We feel bad for you, but we also feel bad for all the death and destruction that's happening in Gaza right now. Now, in the news story, you will hear a translator for Macron. I think that translator has an Australian accent. Macron can speak really good English, but I mean, he's at a summit for French-speaking countries. I don't think he wants to speak English there. But let's talk about how his English got so good. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, learned English in school. He practiced more during his university studies and later when he worked in international banking. His job required him to speak English with many people. He also improved his English by talking to other world leaders and diplomats. You probably already know this, but when two world leaders get together who have different languages, many of those leaders know English as well as their first language, so it's very common for world leaders to speak English.
He then called for arms shipments to be used in Gaza to be halted as part of a broader effort to find a political solution to the war that has since shattered the enclave.
Si on appelle un cessez-le-feu,
If we call for a ceasefire, what's consistent is to not provide weapons of war.
Halt. It's a very fancy way to say stop. There's the definition. Stopped or paused. Paused means stopped for a short period of time. Macron said arms shipments to Israel should be halted to help end the war. We don't have ceasefire as one of our words, but it means to stop fighting. It might be permanent, which means it will last forever, or temporary, lasting for a short period of time. But Macron said, how can we have talks of a ceasefire if arms keep getting shipped to Israel? Shattered. Oof. There is a shattered window in the picture. broken into many pieces or destroyed. The ongoing war has shattered Gaza, leaving many buildings destroyed. Enclave. This is a good word to know. A small area that is different from the larger area around it. If you think about the Gaza Strip, it is surrounded by water, Egypt, and the country of Israel. It is definitely an enclave. Gaza is an enclave surrounded by Israeli territory.
He then called for arms shipments to be used in Gaza to be halted as part of a broader effort to find a political solution to the war that has since shattered the enclave.
Si on appelle un cessez-le-feu,
If we call for a ceasefire, what's consistent is to not provide weapons of war.
Consistent. I hope you are consistently studying English. I'm hoping to give you a lot of encouraging words in this lesson to keep studying English. Consistent. Always the same or following the same rules. Macron said that calling for peace and sending weapons is not consistent. Provider. That is a noun. Provide is the verb. The noun means a person or country that gives something, like supplies or services. In the news story, they said France is not a major provider of weapons to Israel.
If we call for a ceasefire, what's consistent is to not provide weapons of war. And I think those who supply them cannot call for a ceasefire every day and continue to supply them.
France is not a major weapons provider for Israel, shipping about $33 million worth of military equipment last year, according to an annual report by its defense ministry.
Annual. Happening every year. Official definition. Happening once every year. France sent Israel $33 million in military equipment last year, according to an annual report. So this report comes out once a year. You should not study English annually. That would only be studying English once a year. You should do it daily. Are you sick of my words of encouragement about studying English? I'm sorry. I will stop. If you've made it this far in the English lesson, you are very dedicated. You do not need my words of encouragement.
The summit also issued a unanimous statement of solidarity with Lebanon.
Unanimous. When everyone agrees on something. There is nothing unanimous about what is going on in Israel and Gaza. Many different people have many different opinions. The unanimous statement from the summit supported peace in Lebanon. Hey, I did a whole English lesson about Lebanon and Hezbollah. I will leave it down below. Congratulations on making it to the end of this English lesson. Thanks so much for watching.